With less than a week until the Australian federal election, Prime Minister Scott Morrison decided to unveil some new housing policy on Sunday titled First Home Loan Deposit Scheme. From the Liberal Party's website, the scheme involves the following. New home buyers will be able to apply for a home loan with a deposit as low as 5% instead of the normal 20%. They will not be subject to Lenders Mortgage Insurance (LMI), since the government will underwrite their home loans and will serve as the guarantor. This will save borrowers about $10,000. The scheme will be available to 10,000 first home buyers per year, earning up to $125,000 annually or $200,000 for couples. The scheme is relatively cheap, costing only about $500 million. If the current government is re-elected, the scheme would take effect 1st of January 2020. After this scheme was announced, the Australian Labor Party quickly jumped in and said they would match the Coalition's scheme as well, although they were quick to point out that the scheme was obviously a desperate attempt to try and relate to Australians struggling to get into the market. I like how it's been referred to as a scheme, because that's exactly what it is. Scheme, noun, a secret or underhand plan, a plot. Police uncovered a scheme to steal paintings worth more than $250,000. Synonyms: plot, intrigue, conspiracy, secret plan. Personally, I don't think the scheme has been well thought out. In my opinion, it doesn't actually address the housing affordability issue in the slightest. Instead, it makes it easier for young people to get into debt. More debt. And that's not a good thing. Instead of having to pay back 80% of the value of the house under a normal 20% scenario, these young borrowers will have to pay back 95%. So for a $1 million house in Sydney, a touch under the median house price, they'll have to pay back $950,000. More debt, higher repayments. No, this scheme won't help anybody, at least not the people it's meant to be helping. Property researcher Terry Ryder from Hotspotting agrees. He said, "The first home loan deposit scheme will be available to only a limited number of first home buyers, and it fails to address the core issues, the price they will pay for properties and the associated costs of getting into the market." The Coalition has said itself that more than 110,000 Australians bought their first home in 2018. The scheme would only help 10,000 beneficiaries annually, which is less than 10% of first home buyers. Will it be first come, first served? Grattan Institute fellow Brendan Coates spoke of the impending crisis regarding home ownership. He said, "Fewer than half of 25 to 34-year-olds own their own home today. Home ownership among the poorest 20% of that age group has fallen from 63% in 1981 to 23% today. At this rate, almost half of retirees will be renters in 40 years' time. Saving a deposit is the biggest hurdle. In the early 1990s, it took 6 years to save a 20% deposit on the average home. Today it takes 10 years. That's bad news for younger Australians without access to the bank of mum and dad." With regards to the Coalition's new scheme, he said it wouldn't have much benefit. It would only increase home ownership by a little at best. He added, "It might also push up prices, but by even less. Some people saving for their first home might buy earlier. Others just priced out of the market at the moment could afford to pay a little more for a house given that they would not have to pay Lenders Mortgage Insurance." Mr Coates also made note that the greatest challenge faced by first home buyers is not saving up for a deposit, but the high serviceability requirements set by lenders. He said, "Their problem is qualifying for a mortgage when banks assess their ability to repay the loan assuming an interest rate of 7%, much higher than the typical 4%. But he also added that there's an inherent flaw in the scheme. He said, "It tries to fix the housing affordability problem by adding to demand for housing. Because it costs the budget less, the new scheme is less bad than its predecessors, but it shares their critical flaw. It pretends we can make housing more affordable without hurting anyone. At the end of the day, it ends up being a zero-sum game. First home buyers are the losers when prices rise. If we want to genuinely help first home buyers, prices have to fall, and some will be hurt by that. It's a choice we have to make as a society, whether we want younger Australians to be able to live out the Australian dream." Mr Coates said the only way to end the housing affordability crisis is to increase the housing supply, that is, to build more houses. There are ways to make housing more affordable, but that involves prices being lower than they otherwise would be, which will affect homeowners today and will involve tackling contentious issues like density in our cities, which means taking on the NIMBYs. Until we face up to that challenge, we won't make any progress. Nerida Conisbee, chief economist at REA Group, spoke of the effect of increasing the housing supply. She said, "Ultimately, increasing housing supply is a way to address affordability, but again, there are always losers in that. No matter what you do, there's going to be losers. But what's positive with the new plan is that the losses will be relatively minor compared to changing negative gearing, which impacts investors and renters, or increasing housing supply, which comes up with so much local opposition." Brendan Coates replied, saying that it's a fantasy to expect rents to increase as a result of negative gearing changes. University of Tasmania's Vice-Chancellor's Research Fellow, Saul Eslake, suggests that there is a big risk involved in making such a small deposit using the new scheme. He said, "It's in effect encouraging people to take out 95% loan-to-valuation ratio (LVR) loans. In a market where prices appear to be falling, there's a risk that someone who enters this scheme may find themselves in a negative equity position. That is, some Australians will end up owing more than their house is worth." So that's the first home loan deposit scheme in a nutshell. In my opinion, it's not very good policy. It encourages young people to get into debt earlier. It doesn't actually solve the housing affordability crisis. It's risky for borrowers to take on such a large loan. I think there's actually only one reason the Coalition came up with this scheme: to win votes in the upcoming election on Saturday. It will cost them about $500 million to implement, and if that helps them win the election, I guess I think it's money well spent.